Welcome to What Happens Next, the video show, the podcast where I get to interview interesting people who have got insights, particularly if you're going through a transition in your life. Because this channel, particularly the YouTube channel, is dedicated to people who are in their 50s and 60s, thinking about life in a different way, and want to make some positive changes in the right direction. And today, I want to get the insights from Ashley Blackmore, from Ashley Blackmore Coaching, who's going to tell us why maybe explain to us why how we feel and how we react to the world and what we're going to do is a bit of an inside job. And I'm really excited about exploring that. Ashley, how are you doing today, mate?
I'm doing really well, thanks. Yeah, I'm delighted to be here. Really looking forward to our conversation.
I've got a feeling it's going to be a good chat. Before we get on to that, I want to know about the dogs in the background. So what are the names, and are they yours, and where was that photo taken?
Sadly, neither of them are still with me or with us. They're both gone, but the black one was Stan and the ginger one was Clive. Stan was a Springer Lab cross, and Clive, for anyone who knows their collies, will know that if it's ginger, it's Welsh.
Yeah.
So if you come across, they're a separate subbreed or whatever. They look like a collie, but they're ginger. So
love that.
Yeah.
And how long were they part of the family?
Oh, Stan made it to 14. Clive, sadly, just to about 6. He had a tumour, But
our dog's 13 years in now. And
right.
It was one of those things that the kids persuaded me that having a dog was going to be a good thing. And it's surprising how quickly they're incorporated into your life, right?
Yeah, it's incredible. My ex-wife, I was with her for 23 years. And when we first got together, I was like, I don't like dogs, not having a dog. And I thought that was really fair to be upfront about it. Do you know what I mean? And after 9 years, we had a greyhound, and which is anyone who's ever had a greyhound knows it's slightly closer to having a large cat than it is having a dog, really. And after we had the greyhound, then I was hooked, and we moved to where I live now, up near Ely in Cambridgeshire, and we bought an equestrian centre.
Okay.
And he, as lovely as he was, the greyhound Alfie was not a yard dog, so we needed a yard dog, and someone mentioned they knew where some Springer Lab cross puppies were going, and I said, I'll buy one of them for Roz for Christmas. And it was like an out-of-body experience. It was like someone else saying it that wasn't me. I almost stood and turned around and went, who was that?
Who's that bloke who wants to actually get a dog now?
Yeah, who was that bloke? But his nickname was always the best Christmas present ever.
Love that.
Wasn't difficult, as my reputation for buying presents is pretty poor at getting it right. But
Yeah, my journey to getting a dog was really interesting because Charlotte, who's my eldest, who's now 21. One year said to us, we said, what do you want for Christmas? And she went, Dad, I want a little sister. And we didn't think we could have any more kids at the time. So we said, never going to happen, not gonna be a thing. You can have whatever you want, but it won't be that. And then we conceived again. Cassie and I conceived again. I mean, I say conceived, she did the majority of the work, 99% of the work, but we conceived again. And really unexpected, a lovely surprise. Then Sophie came along. And then the following Christmas, Charlotte said, Dad, I know what this year, I want a dog. And I said, definitely not going to happen, definitely not. And she said, Dad, you said that about the sister, and look what happened there. So now I've got 2 daughters and a dog. That's how it all came about. I remember my neighbour, funny enough, she had, like, where we used to live, had 2 massive St. Bernards, and they were amazing dogs. And she used to used to live around the back of a county park. And during the winter, she used to have little rum attached. So people go for a walk, could you give them a little rub? Anyway, we're not here to talk about dogs.
I like that principle. I've never actually come up. Actually, you don't see St. Bernards very often these days. They're quite
I mean,
when I was a kid, but I like the idea of the run.
Oh yeah, I mean, brilliant. But the thing is, to try and feed these dogs were like mini horses. So try and feed St. Bernards. It was a job. It was a job. It was like sort of they probably ate a lot more than the adults in the house, in terms of scope and scale with food. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about helping people manage positive change in their life and the steps they need to take in order to do that. Now, I know all about you because I've done my research, and you were very kind enough to send me a book that is on my list to read. But for those watching who don't know anything about you, can you tell us a little bit about you, where you've come from, and what brings you here today?
Yeah. So you mentioned you'd asked me that, and I always think that's a bit of a, well, what do I say? Where do I start? Do you know what I mean? So really briefly, I was in my home territory the other day, which is Bexley Heath, and so that's where I was born. And I did take my girlfriend on a rather boring trip of a couple of houses that I'd lived in, but I was born at home in Bexley Heath in 1962. There's not much more to say about that. I had a cracking childhood, really.
Brilliant.
You know how it was in those days, especially in the summer holidays. You'd leave home at whatever time you felt fit in the morning and come back when you were ready.
I used to. I mean, I was born in '77, but I remember the summers were just like me on my BMX, and then like mum and dad never really worried about it.
Yeah. You know, I was 77. Crikey, you were born just after the summer of '76, the really, really hot one. Yeah. But yeah, so I don't know. Let's sort of fast forward because we could talk about that stuff for business wise, I had a couple of early jobs. One of which is quite relevant to my life, which is we as a family ended up living in Pembrokeshire for. In fact, my family are all still in Pembrokeshire. I was the only ones who ever moved back. And I ended up selling to farmers in Pembrokeshire, which was quite an odd sort of a thing to be doing as a really suburban London lad. But I love that job. I spent 5 or 6 years doing it, and classic for sort of early 20s. I asked for a pay rise and didn't get one, and so I left and went somewhere that paid me more money, and that meant coming back to coming back to Bexley Heath, and I had a couple of other jobs, but effectively haven't been employed as in PAYE since 1993, and in fact started being. I've been self-employed. Crikey, when was I first self-employed? 1985 to a really long period of time. Then I had a brief dance with corporate life, which was never really quite my place to be. And then I've one way or another, either I've been self-employed working for another company or running my own business ever since. Built and sold a mobile phone company. I was selling mobile phones back in the day when people literally had, why would I want one? And I'm not talking why would I want what we've got now? I mean, why would I want one bolted into my car? Yeah. I sold those on the door knock around the East End of London, which again, massive fun. And so enjoyable, the conversations you get into every day. You knock on a door and they'd open it, and it might be a little old furriers or something, making fur coats, thousands and thousands of fur pelts and pounds worth of. But that fast forwarded to me ultimately owning my own mobile phone business. I sold that. I sold it in 2007. Okay. I fell into consulting. I do stress fell into consulting. I've never had a plan for my career as such. I fell into consulting off the back of that. I consulted for several years, but how I end up where I'm now, to keep it short, is that for a good 10 years, I found myself moderately angry and frustrated a lot of the time. It was just an underlying thing. Everything seemed like an encumbrance to my life. Everything seemed, And I was always willing, not to, I've never had a fight in my life as in fisticuffs, and I'm not a big stand-up arguer, but I was always willing to argue the toss over some point that really didn't matter, or be frustrated with someone about something that half the time had never happened. An example of this would be, just to give you when I lived right out in the middle of the fens, and now live in the village. When I lived in the middle of the fens, to go running, I had to run on fen roads that had no pavement. And motorists would pass you in whatever way they saw fit, some with huge respect and some without. But the amount of motorists in my head that I had arguments with, that I was telling them, where to get off, and we won't, no need for the language here, right? But I was, and there were a few times where I just found myself standing in the middle of the road, giving double fingers to the people who in their rearview mirror. And after a while, quite a few years, at least 10, it just became draining. It was so draining to put all that energy into something.
And that energy is never productive, is it? Do you know what I mean? That energy, like, what do you think, looking back on it, what do you think? What do you think? Because often I always think some of the stuff we do to protect ourselves, all our actions are, there's a reason psychologically behind them. Why do you think you were so angry? What was it that was behind it?
Well, I suspect we're going to talk about that one a fair bit as we go through the interview. I mean, the thing that's behind it is thought, getting caught up in your own thought, and the feeling of your thought feeling real. Yeah. And that whole ability to have an argument with a motorist who you don't know, you've never seen their car before, and you're never going to see their car again. But to spend half an hour of an argument in your head can only come from inside. It can only be you caught up in your thinking, right? Now, at the time, I didn't know that. And I went and revisited things that I'd done before, like NLP and CBT and all sorts of other things. But what happened was I just ended up with a load of techniques, and they didn't work for me. There was no long-term feeling of ease that came from the techniques. I just ended up doing techniques, and sometimes they were a good distraction, but what they didn't do is actually have me feeling calmer, have me loving life, feeling like I was engaged with life, and going back to what I believe is our default state of happiness. So I rarely spend a lot of time just being happy. Yeah,
I love that. Absolutely love that. And when I suppose it's what's fascinating to me is often when we're going through periods of change, that can be fairly stressful because we're going through this element of transition in our lives. What can we do better to just manage change internally in a way that works for us?
Well, not manage it is the answer.
Interesting.
Not manage it is the answer. So if, as I've alluded to, or stated actually, if thought is doesn't often help us, thought is very much an inside out thing. We get very much caught up in the idea that thing over there has made me think this, and therefore that has made me angry. That person said this, it isn't what I expected, they've made me angry. The money didn't turn up on my bank account, I feel anxious. Whatever it might be. But thought is an inside reaction. It's a complete person, and it's an inside reaction to what's going on, and you can't control what thought you have. People talk about, I don't want to have that thinking, but good luck with not having that thinking, because the thought comes up, and so if the thought comes up, then managing it is using the brain to try and fix the brain, if you want, because we think it's the brain that produces thought. I mean, we know thought happens in the brain. We don't know why thought happens. We haven't figured that one out yet. So if it's the brain that produces thought, and you then say, I want to manage that thought, you're now saying to your brain, you've had that thought, now manage it.
So what do we do about it? Or is it nothing? Is it the acceptance of nothing is the way to go?
Well, yeah, that's it. Podcast done. We're off.
Yeah, but you know what was really interesting, because we talk a lot on what happens next, about what we can learn from philosophy, both like a lot of ancient philosophy And when you were talking about, well, don't manage it, just let it. I was thinking about like the Taoist principle of just be like water. Do you know what I mean? Like water is consistent, it flows, but it doesn't get annoyed or angry at anything, does it? It's just there and continues to flow. But for thousands of years, it can erode rock, right? You know, it can like just being flexible like that is an interesting principle. I love it. I absolutely love it. But how do we get the balance right between going with the flow, but also moving in the right direction as humans?
That's a brilliant question. So I've only listened to a couple of episodes, so I need to catch up more because I the ones I've listened to didn't sort of follow that philosophical bent. So my experience of philosophy, or philosophies, particularly at the moment over the last few years, I've spent a lot of time around yoga philosophy, Sanskrit stuff that comes from Sanskrit, and I've heard a lot of stuff about Buddhism and various other things, and even Christianity actually all point to one thing, and I think most big philosophies do. They all point to one thing: that peace is within.
Yeah,
it's not out there.
Yeah.
So one of the things this podcast is about is people getting to an age where they feel that it's time for change, that they want to move on, they perhaps want to retire, or they'd like to be far more philanthropic, or whatever their reasons are. And so clearly to fund that, money is really useful. It's like,
it's the puzzle, right? It's not the puzzle.
Yeah, but it's not the puzzle, because money never made anyone happy. Happiness is an inside-out job, and that comes from, like you say, it's going with the flow. If we're part of something much bigger, if we're part of a universal energy, which we have to be, don't we? It was all going on before us, and it's all going to go on after we've left. And so there's some sort of bigger picture, some universal energy, and you might call it God, you might call it Allah, or you might just acknowledge that before the Big Bang, something had to be there to make the Big Bang happen, right? So if we're all part of that, we are such an infinitesimally small, we're hardly a drop in the ocean comparative to the whole, the whole thing that's going on.
Yeah.
So to be happy, I think the only way to do it is to become at ease with what you're thinking and what's going on.
Yeah,
and
I love that, and it's really interesting. I remember having one of these conversations on What Happens Next with a guy called John Dunkley, and we talked about what the Greeks. And you're right about all ancient philosophies and most modern philosophies talking about life being an inside-out job. The Taoists used to talk about being like water and being able to flow. The Stoics used to talk about focusing on what you can control and not worrying about the rest. Every single philosophy, both ancient and modern, have got their own interpretation and own way of communicating that inside-out job. But it was really interesting because when I interviewed John, one of the things that he said that was fascinating is what the Greeks used to talk about, the ancient Greeks used to talk about in terms of happiness, because they had three different definitions. So they had the element that was all about just having fun, hedonism, just having a great time, which I love as a description. Then they had eudaimonism, which is about purpose, it's about meaning, it's about contribution, it's all of the things, it's the work we do that we get well-being from. And that doesn't need to be paid work, that might be, but just helping others and giving back to others. And then John talked about a great concept called cheronic well-being that I'd never heard of. And he's talked about it in terms of a sense of awe. Where in the world do we feel just generates awe? And weirdly, I'm not religious. I'm not somebody who believes in God. And this is the interesting conversation, because John said, well, I'm not, but I still experience, or when I'm in nature and I look up and go, I'm part of a, like, how small am I on this planet? Or you're at a music concert with 50,000 people and you're having a great time and you're just going, this is bigger than me. And actually, I think experiencing that awe is a really good feeling to have, right?
God, yeah. And what I've seen as I've calmed down and become more at ease with myself, is I experience that so much more regularly. I'll be out for a run perhaps, and just a little while back, it was just a blackbird in a puddle in the road having a wash.
Yeah.
I just ended up staying there for about a couple of minutes, just in awe of what was going on, and I have this expression. It's something that happens to me, but it's like when you go into a TV shop now that they've got, and perhaps a lot of people have got, and my telly's quite old, but you've got the like 4K high def whatever tellies, and I look at them and think that's better than my eyesight. I can't, that is so.
It's a bit wasted on you, actually. It's too good.
It's too good. I look at it and think, my God, I don't see that well. And then I'll be looking at something, or perhaps a person, perhaps I've met someone and I've got caught up in my judgment early doors, and I used to be incredibly judgmental about people. It doesn't mean now so much that I don't do it, although I'm nowhere near as it doesn't happen to me anywhere near as often as it used to, but it does mean now that I tend to see, hang on, you're caught up in judgment.
Yeah.
But what happens often when I'm talking to people is all of a sudden, when my judgment drops away, they burst out into 4K high def. And then I start seeing that everyone inside is bloody wonderful and perfect. Our default state is happiness, joy, and that feeling of being awesome. And what knocks us out of it is thought. The only thing that can take us out of it is our own thinking, how we react to life.
So I'm curious. Somebody's watching this and they're going, I'm not feeling that way inside. What's the first just tiny incremental step they could make to get closer to that feeling of calm, well-being, internal peace?
It's different for everyone. It's different for everyone, isn't it? Because I'm a coach and people can only get anything from me if they have an insight from what I'm telling them. And I can't make you have an insight. I can start mansplaining stuff or whatever, but it's not going to make you have an insight. So I can keep pointing at something, and if I point it from lots of different ways, you might have an insight. Whoever I'm working with might have an insight, and nothing changes for anyone unless they have their own insight about life. But loosely, the people I work with, the people who, the other coaches that coach in a similar way to me would, I think, point towards that. You start to see through the bullshit of your own thinking. You start to realize that your thinking's not real. That if 10 people are all in one room, all looking at the same thing, and 10 people are all having a different thought is never more than quite an illusory thing that you're using to steer your life. I mean,
ultimately, we all tell ourselves stories, don't we?
Yeah. Like last night, I went to see 28 Years Later, and I nearly left actually because it was quite a horror film. But it's like the screen consciousness, if you want. The screen couldn't care less whether I've gone in there to see the latest Disney or whatever. So something far worse. The screen's just the screen. So we've all got a screen. We've all got a consciousness through which we're viewing life, and it's our thinking that's then layering it on top. It's the thinking, and it's this or it's that. So last night, it took me back to watching Doctor Who as a kid. I nearly left because I wanted to get behind the settee.
Yeah, but there wasn't a settee.
Yeah, there wasn't a settee. It's like I'm in the cinema and there's no choice. I've just got to sit and watch it, and I was on my own as well, so there wasn't even anyone to sort of,
Yeah.
So But the thing with watching that as a film is, whilst I still found myself thinking about it a fair bit once I'd left, but I know it's a film.
Yeah.
It's not true. Someone spent a lot of time filming it, and you know, and there's whole bits of it you can sort of quite laugh at. The sort of zombie characters are, you know, brilliant. But when it's related to stuff that we think is more important, like money or family or whatever it might be, we suddenly believe our thinking and think, well, it's got to be real. It's got to be real. This feeling is telling me it's real, and we start acting on it as though it's real, rather than acting on it as though it might be a useful prompt, or it might be a stack of white noise.
Yeah. And this is the thing. If we start treating these stories as facts, that often holds us back. One really interesting thing that you said to me earlier on was how we get to a certain time in our lives, and not all of us, but some of us think about what we can do for others, what we can do for our communities, as you put it, philanthropy. Now, I really like the way when I did the research, you have a bit of a balance between people, planet and profit. And how do you get that balance right? And what sort of thinking tools should we consider when we're thinking about the right balance for us?
It's a great question. How do you get the balance right? So I think there's two answers. So the first one is, as soon as we start to pay attention and just listen a bit more, to say listen to our thought, I don't mean give it more credence. I mean, like, you sort of hear it a bit more and go, oh yeah, well, I'm you know, not only hasn't that ever happened before, it's really unlikely to happen now. That thing I'm anxious about, or that thing that I'm, you know, never has happened. And you start to see through it more. You understand that some thought is really giving you useful pointers about being out of balance. And when you're caught up in all that stuff, you're out of balance. You can't be anything but out of balance when you're caught up in that. And then, you know, those odd occasions like the ones we were talking about, you know, in my world, where, I mean, it doesn't mean that I have to go straight to 4K high def, but it's like, I know when my feet are on the floor, and I know when I look at my feet, and they certainly look like the floor and they're touching the floor, but I'm not feeling it. Does that make sense? When you just not... So we spend so much time not being grounded, not listening to what's truly steering us, that when you start to drop into that more often, the right thing becomes more apparent, and that's the right thing for each individual. Again, one of the things I literally changed my LinkedIn profile yesterday, so it was reflecting a slightly different way of thinking about it. But so the people, planet, profit is everyone's going to find their own balance for what's right for them.
Yeah, true.
And for me, it's very much the planet looms big in that. Yeah. Even when I'm outside of my thinking, you know, my oh my God, did you see the car he's driving, or did you see that, or why have they flown here, or do you know what I mean? The planet still looms big at quite a heartfelt level.
Yeah. It's interesting because I was thinking about that when I was thinking about this interview, and I think people looms bigger for me than the other two, and I think we're all going to have a different balance to that in our own lives, right? You know, it's always going to be different. And what's interesting that you said actually that really resonated with me personally more than anything else, I was speaking to Cassie about this the other day. I often find that I've got a really busy life, and it's all self-inflicted because I choose to go where I want and what I want to do. And we've had a really busy couple of months, and we're going travelling in August. But I said to Cassie, I can't believe we've got 2 weekends where there's nothing in the diary. And Cassie went, how are you feeling about that? And I went, over the moon. Because actually what I've found is that I'm probably out of alignment because I haven't had enough headspace. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes just living your life and being social and doing stuff that's fun and doing work with purpose and all that, sometimes you just need a bit more time to turn around and go, well, am am I doing everything I want to, or do I need a bit more time to reflect on that? What tip would you give to help people find the time in their lives to make sure they're still on track?
Do you know, when you really start, when you're at ease with yourself, when I say at ease with yourself, like you're at ease with, and that really means being at ease with your thinking. You can't be at ease if you're at battle with your thinking. And when you're at ease, you can be on the tube, or you could be at the top of Snowdon. Similarly, you could be at the top of Snowdon and completely full of anxiety because you're looking at the weather and whatever else might be going on, and going, yeah, we got to turn around, we got to go, we're in trouble. Or, do you know what I mean? So as I look out there today, a beautiful blue skies day out there with a modicum of where I am at the moment, a modicum of cotton wool cloud. So blue sky's always available, and thought is like the cloud.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter even if you have 2 or 3 days in the UK where it's completely foggy and it's low and you know, each time you look up there seems to be cloud. 2 things we know is the cloud's always moving, as every thought always does. Every thought moves on. Every single thought moves on of its own accord.
Yeah.
There's nothing to do to move a thought on. And we also know that at some point there'll be a break in the cloud and you'll see blue sky. It's just like when you go to the airport, it doesn't matter how terrible the weather is on the floor. When you get in the plane, once you get above the clouds, it's always blue sky. So when you're above the thinking, or when you're not seeing the thinking in the same way, that reality, like happened to me last night, you know, I'm there happily being horrified. I leave the cinema and I go, oh yeah, I was happily being horrified. You know, and then this morning I'm trying to set up a new laptop, and you just got all that stuff where you go to do something and it hasn't been set up for it yet, and then it takes 15 minutes longer than you thought it would, and then I found myself momentarily, oh, my bloody day's ruined. And it's like, no, it isn't.
Yeah.
Through it, but trying to move it is not the thing. It's actually knowing that the sense made no sense.
Yeah.
So ease is where everything sits, and it's always available. You know, that quietness is always available. It's just whether you drop into it every now and then, or whether you're caught up in your thinking.
Yeah, really interesting. It's not always the environment. It's that whether you're in a position where you choose to do it. Now, I loved an article you recently wrote on LinkedIn that I just want to explore, because you explored 2 concepts that were fascinating to me, which was living life versus playing the game. And I recognise that, actually. I think that's a really good analogy. So from your perspective, what's the difference between those 2 things, and how do we live life more and play the game less?
Wow. Yeah. Great question. So imagine you go down to someone gives you a tennis racket and as many balls as you can hit. You've never seen a tennis racket before, and you're just standing there having, as a kid would do. Imagine you're like 4 or 5-year-old. You've got the motor skills to be able to start actually hitting balls around, and you've got an idea of what you're doing, and you're just standing there having fun. And you're standing in front and you're whacking balls, whatever way it goes, and you're not thinking about whether you're on the forehand or the backhand, or you're just whoa. And there's this limitless amount of balls, and you can just bash them around.
Play. Yeah,
just play. In fact, I spent this weekend with someone was over from New Zealand. They've rented a house down in Sussex, and over the weekend. There's about 25 people came through. Some stayed the whole time and some came and went. And she just wanted to catch up with loads of old friends. And particularly on the Saturday night, without a massive amount of alcohol. There was some, but no one was rolling drunk. It was wondrous just to see adults playing.
Yeah.
So quite made up games. You know, no one had bought any particular games. My girlfriend had bought a couple of hula hoops with her, people trying to hoop stuff going on. And it was just wonderous to stand back and go, oh my God, this is adults playing.
You know what? it's so interesting. I was in the Amazon rainforest last year, so I flew into the Amazon, and when people ask me about the experience of going to the Amazon, there's so much that like I learned and I sort of got to experience and stuff like that. But one of my favourite days being in the Amazon was when they brought the kids out, right? So the school is the hut in the middle of the community.
Yeah.
There's about 40 kids in this community in Ecuadorian Amazon. And they said, Jug, I'd just like bring a football or like a blow-up ball and bring some colouring books and stuff like that just for the kids. So I've blown up this ball and all I'm doing is running with this ball. And there's about 30 kids chasing me and like literally dragging me down as I'm doing it. And literally, I mean, I got a lot more tired quickly than them, but that simple sense of fun and play when there's no distractions, you're in the middle of the jungle, was amazing. And I think about my kids, I think about modern society, and you go, I think there's a lot you can learn about the simplicity of play. And actually, there's also an opportunity when we get to a transition point in our lives to take off the shackles and play a bit more.
Yeah.
And it's the interesting thing is getting to a point where you turn around and decide what rules of the game serve us and what rules of the game don't. But here's the interesting thing. After about 15 minutes of like running away from these kids, them chasing me going, hold on, give me 2 minutes, and then running away again and then chasing me again, I thought, right, I need 2 minutes as a breather because, sat down, and then this little boy sat me on the shoulder, and I've just turned to him and he's just gone like that, right? So I've chucked him up in the air.
Yeah.
I've put him down and there's a queue of 20 kids waiting to be slung up in the air. And I thought, the simplicity of that, do you know what I mean? The simplicity of just, like, as you say, that element of play. And there wasn't any rules. Do you know what I mean? It was just we were playing. But how do we get to a point where we turn around and go, we need a bit of structure in our lives, otherwise things will be absolute chaos. But if we get to a point of transition in our lives and we want to design something that works for us in the next 10, 20, 30 years, how do we decide what rules we'd like to follow because they serve us? And for me, that might be, I like to stay fit, so I lift weights every day. That might be a rule I give myself because my physical well-being is important to me. But then how do we work out what rules of the game we don't want to follow anymore?
That's brilliant. Yeah. So if I finish the tennis analogy,
please do.
Yeah. So you're there like a kid and as the kid gets older, or as you as an adult sort of go, I'd like to be able to play this with someone else. So you bring someone else down and you're now both whacking balls left, right, and centre. And you say, well, it'd be good if there was some way that we could play this together. So you put a net up and you start to, add stuff in. I mean, loosely, I assume that's how tennis came about. Do you know? I don't know quite how it happened, but it didn't start with all the tram lines and everything else, did it? And in the end, it's like, well, yeah, and actually, men need to wear long trousers and women need to wear dresses, and it must be like this and it must be like that and it must be. So, yeah, if you're drawn towards playing tennis at a certain level, the rules are really useful. Yeah. But then some of the rules are just bunk, aren't they? They're just, bunkum. They're just for whatever reason.
You've got to wear this.
Yeah, you've got to wear this, or you must do that, or you. So it just becomes bunkum. So I think one of the things is to see less rules in life and to see more following, coming back to the water analogy, to see more that you're following what you want to do. An analogy that I love, completely stolen from the guy who sent you the book, Mike Neal, actually, it's one of his. And he has this beautiful analogy that says, imagine that you're in the longest film that's ever been made. So it's 13.8 billion years old, and you come into it and you're in it for like one frame.
Yeah, you're a bit part player, aren't you?
You're a bit part player for like one frame, right? And not only you're a bit part player for one frame, but you think that you've written the script, that you're the director, the cameraman, the sound woman. Do you know what I mean? You're everything. You're all of these things. It's your film. Well, it isn't. The film started long before you turned up, and it's going to carry on going long after you finished. So it makes sense to go with what's happening in the film and what's happening with that universal energy we spoke about earlier, far more than it does to go against it. And so we choose, and it is a choice. Lots of people don't see it, but we choose to lead this life. We choose to lead a life where the majority of us want to be in bricks and mortar. We like to own our bricks and mortar. We want to have cars. We'd like to own our cars, etc., whatever it might be. So therefore, there's some rules around that stuff. And some of it's useful, but a lot of it is still we've made up in our head.
Yeah.
It's still, so to get a mortgage needs to be this, and this. And then one person thinks that they're comfortable. I don't know what the multiples are anymore, mate. I'm taking out a mortgage for quite some time. But one person thinks that it's totally comfortable for them to take out 4 times income, and another person would go and get 7 times if it was available, because it's totally arbitrary to the individual what the rules are for them. And one person looks and says, "Oh, I'd never be comfortable living life like you do," and the other person looks back and says, "Well, I'd never be comfortable living life like you do." Because it's all arbitrary. It's all arbitrary stuff. It's like, I've just rebranded and I've chosen blue and yellow because I like them. Arbitrary. Nothing else to it other literally arbitrary. So we get caught up in the rules that we make and then believe in the rules that we make are serving us for a purpose.
And there's a challenge with that, actually, because then, as you say, you get judgmental. Because when people don't follow your rules, you go, well, hold on, is that right? And who's to say you're right, right? It's that element of like, it's so interesting. There's a great book I like written about Stoicism, and there's a great book by a guy called Ryan Holiday, who writes a lot about Stoicism, called Ego is the Enemy. And it talks about this egocentric view of the world that is a particularly modern phenomenon. We do it in the modern world quite a lot. And actually how it doesn't serve us in terms of making us happier in our lives. And it's exactly what you've said. It's like, if you zoom out and look at our lives through a perspective of awe, that it's amazing we've been here, it can be a better journey sometimes, because we don't hold on and tie ourselves to some of the arbitrary stuff that happens. But it's often difficult for people to do. Why do you think that is? And what do we need to do to change our perspective?
It's another good question, mate. You should do this more often. It comes back, I think, to thought being very arbitrary.
Yeah.
Not very arbitrary. Thought is arbitrary. Something happens, you and me are walking down the street. It's a lovely sunny day. We're chatting away, and something happens 50 yards in front of us. And we both react to it completely differently. So in that sense, thought is completely arbitrary. And you might go, did you see what happened up there? And I'm going, and whatever it might be. Yeah. So I think it's when we start to see through the arbitrary nature of thought, understanding that a lot of thought is just white noise.
Yeah.
It's just literally white noise. It takes up our brain. It creates noise in our brain that's not useful. It's not steering you well. Useful thought is, I've just stepped out into the road and there's a bus coming. I better jump back, right? Which goes back to, there's a tiger in that clearing over there. I need to be aware. That's useful thought, and I don't like to make categories of thought as such, but it's like you know, if you really sit with something, whether in your heart it makes sense or whether it's just totally in your head.
Yeah.
And most head-based busy thought, which is a condition of the, particularly the Western human race. I haven't lived too many other places for long enough to know. But the condition of busy-minded human thought takes us away from that ability to start to change, because you're caught up in the rules of it all.
You know what? Here's where I'm curious, actually, because like if you're coaching somebody and they say, I want to get to this outcome. I want to get to I want to get to a point where I achieve this, and I want your help to get the barriers out of the way, get me there, help you achieve. I mean, that outcome could be potentially pretty arbitrary, couldn't it? Do you know what I mean? Whether they get there or not, it doesn't matter. Do you think goals are important in life? And if so, how do they fit into this be like water mentality?
I think goals can only be totally arbitrary.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we all would have tried to have been Usain Bolt. If you know what I mean, we'd have gone to school or I don't know, gone to school and said, right, you're going to be Usain Bolt and you're going to be this and you're going to be, and we all would have gone, all right, there we go. So I think all goals can only be arbitrary. Again, coming back to your world, where you've got someone who's explained to them what they need in their life, and you say, yeah, well, with this amount of money and these amount of funds doing this stuff, your life is funded, and yet their arbitrary thinking still means that they think they won't feel comfortable until they've got double that sum of money in the bank.
Well, but this is the interesting thing, and we one of our best ever. It's really interesting. It had less views, but everybody who's watched it, and it's had about 2,800 views now. Everybody watches it for the full period of time, so that's a sign to me that people are getting a lot of value out there. Is an interview with a lady called Catherine Morgan, and she does a lot of work around the stories we tell ourselves about money. Because actually, and we do it in all aspects of our lives, we tell ourselves stories about, often driven by what we've learned as kids and what we've learned along the way, stories that have been told to us. And that drives our fear about money, that drives our feelings about money, that drives our perspective on money. And sometimes trying to fix the number or trying to continue to work to grow that number it's important to have clarity of where you are financially, but often the problem isn't the clarity. The problems are the stories you tell yourself, which don't change based on you having clarity. And it's getting the balance of the two right, I think is really important. I know the other thing you talk about, on LinkedIn and stuff like that, is helping people make possible what they see as impossible. Tell me a bit more about that and how you help people do that.
Yeah. The biggest limiting factor for all of us at any time is our thinking. It's where we caught up. It's not just thought. So for every thought that we have, and apparently, by the way, I've seen there's plenty of scientific evidence now that we have between 30 and 70,000 thoughts a day. Now, a lot of those, I don't know quite what a lot of them are actually, but it's your brain sort of going, nails grow, I assume. I don't know, or is that just biological? Yeah, but a lot of that is just simple stuff that we don't question, we don't think of, we don't get caught up in. And then there's stuff that we get caught up in. And with each thought comes a feeling, and feelings give thought a truth. They make it feel real. So this is not saying that feelings aren't real. Let me be clear. If you're feeling thoroughly distraught over something in that moment, that is what you're feeling. You're feeling thoroughly distraught, right? If you're feeling happy as about something, well, in that moment you're feeling as happy as. So this is not that feelings aren't true. It's just that the feelings come up arbitrarily with the thought. the thought comes up. We have no control over what thought we're going to have next. And we have no control over what feeling's going to come with that thought. You know, it's you're watching a game of football, if football's your thing, and your team score just when they really needed to score, which again, that's arbitrary, isn't it? They really needed to score now. They scored when they needed to. And you sort of celebrate it momentarily, but immediately go, we could do with another one, right?
Yeah,
Whereas if you sort of said, well, what should I? If you were questioning yourself, well, actually, I could just be very happy right now. But no, I've got caught up in the anxiety. We could do with another one. So it's all about helping people see through where they're stuck in their thinking.
Yeah, gotcha.
And it's about helping people see through where they're stuck in their thinking, where their thinking isn't serving them well, and that what seems impossible is completely possible.
Yeah.
If you're not caught up in it. Yeah. How many people do you know said I could never run a marathon, then do?
Yeah.
You know, marathons are a bit of a thing these days, aren't they? And suddenly they see life differently. Something changes. They do a couch to 5K, and then they go, oh wow, I never. And then they go, well, I'll do it. And next thing they run a marathon.
You know what? I really like that concept of just incremental actions to take you close to something you want to achieve. Because from couch to marathon, and that's why I love the park run community and the couch to 5K concept. Because it's like that step, isn't it? If you want to run a marathon, that step towards helping you get there. But you know what? And this is something we talk about quite a lot on what happens next. It's that I'm playing I'm playing a lot of paddle tennis at the minute. Now, do I go just for the sport? Definitely not. I mean, I wish I was a little bit better, and I'm incrementally improving. But I'm really enjoying the social engagement I get from coming along and just having a laugh. And it's interesting how sport can do that, right? What do you? Because I know you're a runner. What do you get out of that? Just being physical, running long distances. What do you get most out of it? What's the element that keeps you getting the trainers on, even if it's pouring down the rain or not particularly great out there?
Oh, mate, now that really is a good question, because I don't know anymore. I'm not sure. So
interesting.
It used to be, a few years back when I was doing some pretty big stuff, some fairly big old challenges. It was ego. It's like, I want the finish.
So interesting.
I want the finish. I want the kudos. One of the things I've done, I had the tattoo on the back of my leg, right? So people, oh, you've done that.
It wasn't about ego. It was about, now it's all arbitrary, though, and you're still running. What's the reason?
Now it's much more. I find more joy in it.
Yeah.
I find more joy in it. I find that I can go to a place of ease. I don't have to run to go to a place of ease, by the way. Yeah. But I find more joy in it. I can go to a place of ease. I can, or I do go to a place of ease. And actually, I'm doing a reasonably big event this July. But I know that if I listen to my body now and really listen to my heart, I just don't need to do any more running and stuff for a while. I need to do suppleness and strength.
Yeah.
It's time for suppleness and strength. Now, a few years back, that was already the story, but my ego was like, yeah, where's the medals in that one then?
Yeah.
You can just squeeze out another whatever it is, and And
I've had conversations like this. You go, oh, you've run a marathon. What time do you get? And I always answer, doesn't matter. You know what I always say, actually? I was super slow.
Yeah.
Never about the time for me. It was about there was an element of proving to myself that I could do it. And I think that was important. And because I think building my own resilience was important. But I'm not there to beat anybody. I'm there to challenge myself to achieve a goal. Mate, I've loved today. But one last question before we go. I'm a lover of stories, and I think stories are a really great way to communicate the value we add to the world. What story best describes the work you do?
Oh, what story best describes the work I do? It'd be, I'm trying to think of the film, but it'd be the film where the main character goes along and they get so caught up in what they can and can't do. And then ultimately they just see that they were okay all along. Bit schmaltzy, bit cheesy. Do you know what I mean? You know the film where they just find out they were always fine.
Yeah,
They go. It's like the high school kids film where they want to be in the cool gang, they want to be this, they want to be that, they want to be all those things, and then they just find out they were fine
they
from
were
it.
fine.
They
I
were
love
always fine, and there was never a problem.
I'm just glad that when you went down the film analogy route, you didn't say 28 years later, because that would have been a bit worrying. Where can people find out a bit more about you and the work you do?
Well, my new website literally is going live today, so they can find me at ashleyblackmore.com, or they can look me up on LinkedIn.
Brilliant, mate. I've loved today. Thank you for being so thoughtful and giving us a real insight into you and your work.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You got a real